Hey there, my name is James Lee. Welcome to 5149, where I make videos about business, politics, and society. Before I get started this week, I just want to say a big thank you to all you awesome 5149ers out there for your support. It means a lot to me, and if you're new, give this video a watch. I think you'll like it. So last week, the FAA announced the grounding of dozens of Boeing 777 aircraft because an engine exploded mid-flight. Yeah, not good. So today I wanted to examine the case of Boeing and how an obsession with a single financial metric for the sake of pleasing Wall Street destroyed America's greatest aerospace manufacturer along with 346 innocent lives. Founded in 1916 by a lumber industrialist named William E. Boeing, the Boeing Company has dominated commercial aviation for over half a century, and today, more than 10,000 Boeing-built commercial jetliners are in service worldwide, which is almost half the world fleet, and about 90% of the world's cargo is carried aboard Boeing planes. Now that's the story that Boeing would like to tell, but that's not today's story. Today's story starts in 1997 when Boeing merged with its competitor McDonnell-Douglas with a new company led by these two guys, CEO Phil Condit and President Harry Stonecipher. The important thing to know is that prior to the merger with McDonnell-Douglas, Boeing was a company driven by engineers. Its executives held patents, designed wings, spoke the language of engineering and safety as a mother tongue. As late as the mid-90s, the company's chief financial officer had minimal contact with Wall Street and answered colleagues' requests for basic financial data with a curt, "Tell them not to worry." But after the merger, Condit and Stonecipher, who came over from McDonnell-Douglas, a company that jacked up its stock price by going on a quote-unquote cost-cutting tear, had other ideas. They wanted Boeing to, quote, run like a business rather than a great engineering firm. Boeing's 40,000 employees fought against this culture change, culminating in a 40-day strike that shut down production in 2000. One union leader said, "We weren't fighting against Boeing, we were fighting to save Boeing." This next part is still unbelievable to me, but the executives, they just straight up and left. Not the meeting or the building, but the city itself. Condit and Stonecipher moved Boeing's headquarters away from Seattle, where the company had been based since its founding, to Chicago, over 1,700 miles away from its nearest manufacturing plant. So in Chicago, the company became obsessed with not engineering, but with something called RONA. No, it's not the RONA that we've all become so familiar with the last 12 months. RONA is a financial metric that Wall Street loves. It's basically just a ratio, income over net assets. According to analysts, RONA is the most effective broadly available financial measure to assess company performance. It captures the fundamentals of business performance in a holistic way, looking at both income statement performance and the assets required to run a business. It's just a fancy way of saying how much money do you make selling planes divided by what you have to own to make those planes. And you can improve RONA in one of two ways. You can sell more or you can own less. Boeing tried to do both and they failed, big time. So first, how do you sell something without owning any of the assets? Well, you outsource it, have somebody else make it for you. And that's the story of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, the first plane developed under Boeing's new RONA-obsessed culture. It's actually not that uncommon for companies to outsource components to external suppliers. For example, Ford has many key suppliers for its vehicle parts. But in the case of Boeing, they didn't just outsource the manufacturing of the parts, they turned over the design, the engineering, and the manufacture of entire sections of the plane to some 50 strategic partners. Take a look at this jigsaw that is the Dreamliner. Just the wing itself. The wing tips are made in Korea, the fixed trailing edge is from Japan, and the movable trailing edge is from Australia. And the results were disastrous. The plane suffered from major safety issues, from onboard fires relating to short-circuiting batteries, to failing fire extinguishers, to problems with its oxygen system. On top of that, there were numerous reports of shoddy production. Managers told employees to install equipment out of order to make it appear to Boeing executives in Chicago, the aircraft purchasers, and Boeing shareholders that the work is being performed on schedule, where in fact the aircraft is far behind schedule. Cynthia Kitchens, a former quality manager, said her superiors penalized her in performance reviews and berated her on the factory floor after she flagged wire bundles rife with metal shavings and defective metal parts that had been installed on airplanes. It was intimidation, she said. Every time I started finding stuff, I was harassed. We've been so lucky with the 787 that these safety issues haven't resulted in a fatal crash, but I hate to say this, it might really only be a matter of time. Joseph Clayton, a technician at the North Charleston plant, one of two facilities where the Dreamliner is built, said he routinely found debris dangerously close to wiring beneath cockpits and said, quote, "I've told my wife that I never plan to fly on it. It's just a safety issue." And beyond all these egregious problems with safety, the finances didn't pan out so well either. Management had said that this new supply chain would reduce the 787's development time from 6 to 4 years and the development cost from 10 to 6 billion. In fact, the development cost ballooned to $32 billion and took 9 years. The funny thing about accounting is, RONA still looked excellent, but it could be more excellent. The Boeing execs were like, well, we've gutted our assets, now let's jack up our income. And that decision led to the Boeing 737 MAX. In 2010, Boeing's competitor Airbus announced that they were releasing a new airplane called the A320neo that was more efficient and was about to receive a huge order from American Airlines. So in response, Boeing execs said, no, not so fast. We have something that is even more efficient. And the best part, the pilots don't even need to be retrained, just a quick iPad course and they're good to go. Except they had no such plane. You see, Boeing had plans to build a whole new airliner from scratch, but that would have taken too long. So they're like, let's take the 737, a plane that we first designed in 1967 for 50 people, the one which had already been updated numerous times with more and more powerful engines, with the most recent version already sporting such a big engine that they had to squash the engine casing on the bottom so it could clear the ground safely and put an even bigger engine on it. With that sales proposition, the 737 MAX became Boeing's best-selling plane. The problem with sales-driven engineering is that it's not based on any science or physics, just dollars. So to mount this new engine, they had to physically move it forward and upward on the wing, which dramatically changed the plane's center of gravity. This presented not only some safety challenges in the testing, as the plane had a tendency to stall, but at a minimum, the pilots would need to be retrained because the flying characteristics would have differed too much compared to the previous versions of the 737. But that wasn't an option because Boeing had sold the plane with the proposition that the pilots weren't going to need retraining, so they decided to hack it with a software fix called MCAS, which, maybe you could argue that was innovation since it's applying a software fix to a hardware issue, except they did it in such a boneheaded way. First, they outsourced the software development to coders in India who were paid $9 an hour. Second, they designed it with only one point of failure, so the whole thing relied on one sensor. Another big no-no in aviation. Third, are you ready for this? Boeing inexplicably decided to delete any mention of the software in the training manual and asked the FAA if they were cool with that. And the FAA, because it was and is still so underfunded, said, yeah, sure, in fact, why don't you just self-certify your own plane? So lo and behold, at some point, the sensor was bound to malfunction, and when it did, the pilots had no idea what to do because they didn't know the software existed in the first place, and the result is Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 and 346 deaths. And this type of financial engineering happens in every industry, and it's happening more and more. I'll give you a quick example. In 2019, pharmaceutical manufacturer Novartis announced that they were going to outsource their API production. API stands for active pharmaceutical ingredient. Think ibuprofen and Advil. So yes, to cut costs, they are going to outsource the production of the most important part of the drug itself. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now entering a new era of late-stage capitalism, or maybe we've been in it for a while, but we're entering an era where drug companies no longer want to make their own drugs, and where aircraft manufacturers no longer manufacture or even assemble its own planes, all in the name of RONA and shareholder value. And that's the story of how capitalism destroyed Boeing and killed innocent people. The reason why I wanted to talk about this today is because it shows how important we need a well-functioning government. Businesses, they're always going to try to cut corners to make money. It's really supposed to be the job of the government to protect the consumers. But when we have a situation where the FAA is so underfunded and lacking technical expertise and letting manufacturers certify their own planes, this kind of result is inevitable. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your support. Please be sure to like this video, share it, and subscribe. It really helps me out. My name is James Lee. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you next week.